conversation can get, thank you, can get involved. But the first thing that I'd like to do is to introduce you to your hosts for your lunchtime webinar today. So first, there's me. My name is Addie Peters, and I'm relatively new to the Children's Trust. I joined earlier this summer. I'm a long-term resident here in Bethel, although originally I am from Hollywood in County Wicklow, Ireland. And I am now serving as the Director of Prevention Strategies at Alaska Children's Trust. And I will pass you over to my colleague, Kayla, next, who will introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I am Kayla Pfister, and I'm trying to not spotlight Addie anymore. Okay. Well, anyway, I'm Kayla Pfister, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement at the Alaska Children's Trust. I've been here for 5 years. I used to start as the Director of Communications, and so that's how I got involved in the project, since there's a really big aspect of communicating with the public for this project, as you'll see. And I will pass it over to Mirna.
Thanks, Kayla. My name is Mirna Estrada. I am Director of Communications for the Alaska Children's Trust. I've been here for over a year, but been a fan for a long time. So very, very excited to collaborate with Addie and Kayla on this project. So I'm going to move on and pass on the mic to Malia, our special guest today.
Yes, hello. My name is Malia Noor. I am originally from Wrangell, but I live in Portland, Oregon these days. I am a survivor of childhood abuse, and I'm a member of this, the advisory committee for the lived experience storytelling, which I'm sure you'll learn about. And I work in child abuse prevention now, and so I'm just big fan of the Children's Trust, big supporter, big cheerleader, and just happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Malia. And also with the Children's Trust, we have Teresa with us, who will be helping out with monitoring chat and things like that. So Teresa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Eddie. Hi, everyone. My name is Teresa. I'm a program specialist for policy and advocacy here at the Children's Trust. So happy to be here with you all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Teresa. And again, welcome to everybody. Welcome to everybody both here in our Zoom space, and also we are streaming on Facebook Live. So we'd love to have the opportunity to have everybody introduce themselves, but we are delighted to have so much interest in this topic and so many people here that we won't quite be able to do that. That said, I see lots of, lots of new and also lots of familiar faces and old friends. So hello, everybody. And please do feel free to just, as we're going through, to make ample use of our chat feature. Say hello, let us know where you're calling in from, and connect with each other. So as much as possible, given that we've got lots of information to share, as much as possible, we also want this to be like a conversation and to be an opportunity for people to connect and to make new connections. So that said, very little housekeeping. Just if you're not speaking, please do mute your mics, because that just helps with not having to deal with any background noise. And then if you do have questions, comments, thoughts that arise, I will try to remind myself to pause from time to time for that. But absolutely feel free to just come off mute. You can interrupt any of us, or raise your hand and let us know you've got something to say. So before we jump right into content, I would like to pause and just ask if anybody has anything that they'd like to say or ask at the moment. All right, well, Kayla, I think we'll go right to the next slide then. So the first sort of question for us, all right, is why a storytelling project, or why a lived experience storytelling project? And the answer, I suppose, is it's manyfold, but certainly at least twofold. And, so as humans and throughout history, stories are both how we make sense of our world, and of course, how we connect, how we build relationship with each other. So they're really a natural venue for anything where we want to talk about coming together, healing, dealing with life experiences. And then, of course, the voice of lived experience and expertise by experience is really needed. And we've seen that for any social change. So if we think of movements like the women's rights movement, civil rights movement, Me Too movement, even think about organizations like AA. For any of these, we see that real change both can and does happen when people who have that lived experience, who hold on to that expertise, bring about change in our world. And so that's why it makes a ton of sense for us to think about intentionally having and creating a platform and a shared space for a lived experience storytelling project. On this next slide here, you will see this is not your classic glass half full, glass half empty question. The question I actually want to pose to you when you have a look at this outstretched hand holding actually a pretty full glass of water is the question, how heavy is this glass of water? And the answer really depends on how long a person has to hold it, how long you have to carry it, right? It's not much of a burden in the short term, but in the long term, holding your hand out and holding on to that by yourself, it gets heavier and heavier and heavier. And so it is with trauma. So it is with child maltreatment. The longer a person has to hold and carry that, or hold and carry that by themselves, the heavier and the heavier it can get. And some people, we know, hold this glass of water or carry their burdens that were never theirs in the first place, right? There was no responsibility for them, but they carry them for a really long time. And we know that for many people, silence can feel like it is the only option. And so we think that a project like this, that the Lived Experience Storytelling Project, can change that, can make something other than silence feel like an option for people. All right, we'll have a look at the next slide, Kayla. Thanks. So our storytelling project is also very much about peer support, very much about letting people know that they're not alone. So this really, I love this lovely picture or poster here is actually from a suicide prevention class that I facilitated in Bethel some time ago. And, I think the sentiment or the message that peer support saves lives applies equally when we're thinking about child abuse and neglect. A little bit later on in our webinar, Myrna will be showing you a toolkit so that you can share some of this information from your organization's perspective and with your outreach. And there's a couple of quotes in there from people who've participated in our lived experience videos. There's Elsie who says, when one child is hurt, we're all hurt. Or Rob who says, not only are you going to live, but you're going to live well. And so I think about those kind of quotes and that power of peer support. And that's what I just wanted to front load us a little bit with here this lunchtime. So, all right, let's have a look at our next framing thought. All right. So, I come with a background in mental health and a background very much in trauma-informed cares and practices. And one of the things that I really like to talk about when we're talking about being trauma-informed in our work is that what we want to be aiming for is creating what I call an opposite experience. So where trauma or where abuse says you are weak and powerless, we want to say, no, you have strength and power. Where trauma says you don't matter, we want to say, lift up your voice, it matters. Where trauma, where child maltreatment tells us the world is a dangerous and scary place, people won't help you, people won't listen to you. We want to be able to say, there is safety here, there is support here. So if that's what we want to do, right, then we need to be very intentional about that. We need to create those spaces. Another kind of way to think about this, the opposite experience, we want to flip the script. We want to flip the script on trauma. We want to flip the script on whose voice is heard and who has the power. I don't know if many of you followed that awful trial in France, but where really her name is Giselle Pellico, and her voice really rose to the top, and I think really is part of another wave of a movement, and where she very clearly said shame needs to change sides. And so again, I think that's again getting a little bit at some of what we want to do in creating this opposite experience and being intentional about whose voices it is that we raise, that we listen to, and that we provide a safe and a supportive space for. And then I think we have it just for now, a last slide or a last thought from me before I hand you over to Kayla. And so this quote from David Ausberger just shows us, I think, how very important it is that we truly listen to others. And so with that, we're going to move in a little more specifically to Alaska Children's Trust's storytelling project and our involvement there. So
well, thank you everybody for joining. It's really nice to have some of our lived experience board members in the room. I know some family and friends of Malia's in the room, and just some of our really key partners. I saw Spirit of Youth is here. I saw Denali Family Services is here. So thank you all for being here. And our story for this project, it goes back a long ways. One of the things that the Children's Trust doesn't really do a lot of is we don't do a lot of public tabling events. You don't see us at like, sometimes we've gone to Reading Rendezvous, or sometimes we'll go to the Polynesian Association's events, but we don't do a whole lot of public speaking opportunities to engage with the community. And one of the reasons for this project came about because the few times where we did do public speaking events, where we were engaging with the public, we began to see a pattern. We began to see that people came and they sought us out because they knew that our mission of preventing child abuse and neglect, that was our mission. And they would come looking for us because they wanted to share their story. They wanted to share what had happened to them in childhood, and they needed someone to tell. And so they found us. This happened during Child Abuse Prevention Month in April at the Anchorage Museum. It happened at Orange Shirt Day events for National Day of Remembrance of U.S. Indigenous Boarding Schools. And it just continued to happen, where people would come up, they would share their story, and then we would try to connect them with resources. And we realized that there was a real need for a place for people to put out their story and to find community, and also to be able to ask the questions that they didn't know where else to ask. They couldn't just Google some of the answers to these complex questions they had. So we started to brainstorm a way to give them that space. And we decided that while in-person spaces are really important, something that we would be able to offer to every Alaskan would be an online space. So our first step in the project was to bring in people with lived experience. As Addie was saying, having individuals that can speak to their own life experience and oftentimes their professional experience too, because a lot of times those things end up interweaving, was very important to us for the project. And so we brought together an advisory group of about 10 to 15 people from all across the state with all different types of experiences with child abuse and neglect, ranging from they had it experienced themselves to a sibling had experienced it, to generationally, some members of their family had experienced it. We brought together these folks and we started brainstorming. We started figuring out what would be the best way to do this? And we decided we really needed to set ourselves up for success by developing some guidelines and some care resources to make sure that while we were doing it in a trauma-informed way that really put the survivor and their family members first and foremost. So we developed some resources, and we will definitely share these out in an email after the webinar concludes, along with the recording, by the way. We developed some resources, not just for individuals who choose to share with us, but also if you choose to share with a family member, if you choose to share with a friend, if that's your safe space. And so we started with that. And then we started identifying what kind of stories were important to put out into the world. What kind of stories would someone see and they'd feel like they weren't alone? We looked at the demographics of our state. We wanted to make sure we had men represented because often we don't hear those stories as much for child abuse and neglect. We wanted to make sure we had men represented. We wanted to make sure we had different parts of the state and different experiences there. So we started filming videos with some super brave Alaskans that chose to tell their story and actually have it recorded. And so we're going to be playing one of those in a little bit. But we film these videos as a way to bring people in, to give them a face to a story, to help them relate. And then we partnered with an organization called Our Wave, which I'll show you some of the website in a little bit. But Our Wave is a nonprofit, or no, actually they're a company. They operate across the world, and they partner with other organizations like USA Gymnastics is one of their partners. The Me Too movement is one of their partners to make a space for survivors to be able to share. So I'll show you some of those, some of the website in a little bit. But I wanted to introduce you to some of the folks that really made this project possible. These are some of our video storytellers. So we have Rob on the left. We have Savannah, Taria, Malia, and Gay. We have one missing from here, which is Elsie Boudreau, who very publicly shared her story, I think a couple decades ago, and we have her video as well. So these were the brave people that decided that this was the next step. The next step either for themselves, some of them felt called to share their story because they knew it was a step in their healing journey. And others knew that even though it was a little bit out of their comfort zone, being able to put their story out in the world would help so many other people that they still decided to go forward with it. And so today I'm super honored to introduce our special guest, Malia Noor. And Malia used to work at the Children's Trust, and she gave a little introduction earlier. But I just want to thank her for being here because we put it out there to the advisory group and asked, is there someone that would want to speak? And she volunteered right away, as she always does, to share a little bit of her story and just why this project is important to her. So I'll turn it over to Malia.
Yeah, thank y'all for inviting us. I didn't really plan what to talk about, so I hope y'all are ready for a story that I haven't finished out yet. But my story of how I got involved in this project really starts when I was 15 years old, when I first got away from my parents. My dad was, incredibly abusive, and my mom was deep in addiction for most of my childhood. And when I was 15 years old, I ran away from my dad, and I took my little siblings with me, and I came back to my home community, and I told people about what had happened and about what had been going on and about, everything I realized. I told people about what it was like to realize that everything you knew and everything you had lived your entire life was not the way other people were living, and that things actually were not meant to be that way. And I was most of the time met with the response of people saying, I didn't know. And I think this was meant to be like a comforting thing, people trying to tell me, like, if we knew, we would have helped, if we knew, we would have stopped. But it really just made me angry because, one, because I was a teenager, but two, because, I had been a walking, talking case of child abuse. I smelled like cat pee all the time. I had bruises. I was scared of my dad. There were all these signs of what was there. And I didn't have these people who cared about me step in to help and to do something. Instead, I wound up having to save myself at 15 years old and try to take my little siblings with me. And I was just so angry. And so I started telling my story, you know, almost like shouting from the rooftops, like, this happens in our community, in our little town where everybody knows everybody. This happens. And it doesn't have to be that way. And because I was so vocal, more people started coming to me. People in school with me, you know, came and told me that they lived through something similar, or that they were still going through something similar. And it just made me so much more angry and hopeless to hear that it was happening to so many other people, and it was just swept under the rug all the time. And if it was brought up in conversation, you know, it was almost like so taboo that the person who's telling that story is treated like they're the one who should be ashamed, you know, like that idea that shame should be turned the other direction. At that point in time, it felt like the shame was turned toward us, toward the survivors. And so I just got louder and louder with my story and more direct with how I talk to people about it, you know, not necessarily telling all of these gruesome details or needing to know every single, you know, incident I survived, but telling them that this was my reality and this is how it is now to be someone who's survived and has gotten to the other side and is met with a world that doesn't know how to handle me, you know, with people who don't know how to handle me, and people who, because they don't know how to, you know, interact with you when you say like, yeah, my dad's been abusing me for the last 15 years, who just fall into silence or who fall into awkwardness because of it. And I think that's why I was really, really drawn to this project is not just because of my story itself. Like, my story's already out there. I haven't been quiet about it since I was 15 years old. I'm in my late 20s now. It's been out there for a while. But because as I have told more stories from my childhood, and not all of them even about abuse, you know, there's so many stories from my childhood that are like this funny thing that happened that, you know, does involve abuse, but it's not about the abuse, it's about the funny thing, or about, you know, one of my siblings' first words, or about, you know, adjusting to life after getting away from our parents, or you know, moving in with our first foster family or whatever. And these stories do hold bits of abuse, they do hold, you know, hardness, but I still deserve to be able to tell them, right? I'm not the one who committed all those wrongs. My dad was. And I'm not the one who should be punished for telling, you know, the truth about what happened, and for, I shouldn't have to hide those pieces to be able to share these stories from my childhood and from my life, and to be able to connect with people in that way. And I think that's where I see this storytelling project coming into place, is not just raising awareness, not just, you know, showing that this is real, but helping people connect beyond that gap, you know, of people who have survived and who know what it's like, and people who don't even want to think about it because the idea of someone hurting children is so atrocious, right? And like, I trust me, the people who have survived child abuse know that more than anybody else. And so I'm really hoping that this project can be, you know, not just a space of raising awareness of this horrible thing that should never happen, but a space of seeing survivors for who they truly are. And that is a whole entire person who has decided to keep going, even though the start of their life was not what it should have been, and who have decided to look toward a future that they have so much more control over and that they can have so much more hope over, and to connect with fellow survivors to share how we've all healed and how we have all moved forward and how we have all dreamed of the future, and what we want this future to be together. And it's been really exciting. I think, you know, people who don't work in this kind of work, people who are not, you know, as enmeshed in this world of like preventing the bad things from happening, probably think that a project like this is just all like, you know, doom and gloom and tears and everything. And like, yeah, there's a lot of tears and there's a lot of hard stuff. But being around other people who have lived through things like me, it's been really wonderful, because I don't have to explain things. I don't have to translate things. I don't have to, you know, tell them how, you know, children protective services work or anything. They just understand, and we can move past all of that and just get to the each other, and get to, you know, the things we share and the way we love each other, and get to the laughter and the humor and the healing. And I really hope this project can bring that to a lot more people. And so I definitely recommend checking out the website, you know, contributing if that's what feels good to you. If you want your story to be heard and this feels like a place for it, you deserve that. And so, take advantage and be willing to hear and know that if you want to speak, your words will be heard. Yeah, I think that's all I got, Kayla.
I have a question for you, so hopefully
Yeah.
it's not. My question is, I think there's a lot of people here that are interested in integrating lived experience in their work outside of child abuse and neglect that, with a lot of the systems that you work within and tribal health and having an MPH and all of that. Can you talk about just overall outside of child abuse and neglect about integrating people with lived experience into people's work?
Yeah. I mean, if you're working in some kind of, it's always great to incorporate people with lived experience. I would say, first of all, if you are not that person with lived experience, just accept the fact that you're not the expert. Have humility. Even the people who have survived things, they're only so much the expert. So have humility and be willing to be corrected and humbled and put in your place, because if you don't know what it's like to go through something like that, there's probably a lot of things that you don't realize go on in your communities, in your systems, in your, even amongst your neighbors that you might learn about, and that it will take a certain amount of humility to be able to accept, and to take that voice seriously. Another recommendation for making it easier is, as much as possible, find ways to compensate people for that labor that they're doing of telling their story, of of shedding light, of digging through the system, of telling you how it actually all shakes out at the end of the day when you are that person who is surviving child abuse, who is thinking about suicide, who is whatever it is that you're looking for lived experience on. If you're asking people to help you understand, that is work and it deserves to be paid. And the reality is, if you're not paying people to do that kind of stuff, chances are they're not going to be able to help you that much, because they got their own bills to pay, they got their own work to do, and volunteerism only goes so far. That's just the practical reality. And then also just like learn to be a good listener. It takes work. Listening takes work, and it doesn't come naturally for everyone. It comes naturally for very few. And so you can look up, Google how to be a good listener. You can take little short classes on it, or you can just try out different ways of listening and see what works best for you and see what makes people feel the most heard. Try it out and decide what is your best style.
Awesome. I knew you would be ready for that. Well, thanks, Malia. Does anyone have any specific questions for Malia? This is a great opportunity to ask. I'll always put them in the chat and she can look there too. Sometimes people don't want to speak up. Regarding best practices and compensation and things like that, a couple other organizations have reached out to the Children's Trust over the years. I think you have a question in the chat too, Malia. So I'll just finish what I'm saying. And then if you have questions about how we set up a structure for that, or how we, paid people, feel free to reach out, because I know that is like a very hot topic right now on how to do that. And we also have worked with Covenant House Alaska, because they do a lot of their folks do speaking sessions, and we spoke to them before getting into it about considerations for being part of a project like that and that kind of thing. So we have a lot of resources related to that. So I think you have quite a few questions. So I'm going to mute again.
Yeah, there's so many good questions in the chat, and these first two questions kind of tie together. So question one, what has been the hardest and the best part of sharing your story publicly in your community? The hardest part and the best part are kind of together. The hardest part has been, I didn't really expect people to believe me. And I had a lot of reasons for that. There had been times when I was younger when I, said things, not necessarily straight up saying I'm being abused, but mentioning stuff, and I wasn't believed. And I had brought my case to the police and wasn't really met very well with that. There was never really any justice in my situation. And I think all I knew the first 15 years of my life was this abuse. And I didn't know if people would believe me. And I was really worried about the hurt that would come from that, because in a small town like Wrangell, like everyone's my neighbor, everyone's my cousin, everyone's my uncle or auntie or something. There's nobody who's not connected to you somehow. And I did not really have a need to be so afraid. My community has been so supportive and so ready to listen and so ready to accept my anger and to meet it with calmness and acceptance and to love me even when I am angry like that. And I think that has been a really healing part of my story, is to see the other end, to see the opposite of that situation, and to come into this home that is so loving. I mean, I think it's another really hard part has been seeing how it still happens despite me sharing my story, and despite people being more aware because of it, and despite our community caring so much. Like, there's a lot of things you can say about Wrangell, but people in Wrangell care. They care deeply, they care intensely, they care all the time. And it's hard to still see it happen. But I think, knowing that there are other people in it with me, trying to change the way things work, trying to make our community better, it makes it easier to burden that reality. And then, did I receive pushback from my employer at all for telling my story publicly? Well, I actually started doing this kind of, prevention work when I was like 19 years old. I didn't know that's what I was doing at the time. I just kept trying to do stuff that helped, and it turns out that that's called public health. And so I was never received pushback because telling my story helped the work. It wasn't ever something that was controversial. It was clear that what I was doing was helping every effort that we were putting in. Now, if I think about the workplaces I had as a teenager, and my younger days, would I've had pushback there? Perhaps, but I never had to find out.
Awesome. Thank you for your answers. And if you folks, you can keep putting questions in the chat and she can respond in the chat there too. All right. Oh, we have a hand raised. Go ahead, Mackenzie.
Hi, I thought it might just be easier to speak than type. First of all, Malia, thank you so much for sharing your story. I have a question. So I am the new operations manager at a recovery center down here in Homer. It's actually my first day. And I'm looking for ways to try and incorporate this into aligning with some of our visions for the future of supporting families. And then also, addiction doesn't happen in a vacuum. And so kind of going through a trauma focused lens on ways to support people in addiction through this kind of storytelling experience. I'm just wondering if you have any suggestions for in-person type of events and ways that we could really utilize, because we have a public space for in-person events through using this storytelling. I don't know if that's super clear, but
I'm sure I have lots of ideas. Yeah, somebody put talking circles in there. Kind of depends on the type of event. I think that's another. Stories are complex. I say I wound up in the system. One of the reasons is my mom, was deep in addiction. And for anyone who knows my mom on here, don't go at her, okay? She's very sober right now and has been for over 5 years, and I'm very proud of her. And I'm very happy to have my mom back. And so, if anyone else is holding on to anger at my mom, just know that I'm working on forgiveness. And I ask that people follow me in that, because it's my decision. It's my mom. I get to choose. So with that out there, I think addiction is an incredible area for peer recovery. My best recommendations are just having peer support in there, implementing storytelling as much as possible, especially in talking circles. I would definitely connect with ACT to just get an idea of how they have made, just like the practicalities of how they've made this project come to being, whether that's the legal practicalities or tech or whatever. And then I will see if I can find, I think I have like a couple of organizations that I think you might like. I'll see if I can find them real quick and shoot you in the chat.
that would be awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, we do have peer support staff that work here, but just kind of looking for more ways to have events that are open to the public and kind of seeing this place as a place for hope and recovery and the things that contribute to that like healing. So thank you.
Sounds like Kayla's having difficulty with
Okay,
her.
okay, can you hear me now?
And you got it. We can hear you now. Yeah.
All right, the headphones just decided to quit, sorry. Okay, I'm back, sorry, everybody. Thank you so much, Malia and Mackenzie. Yeah, feel free to reach out to us if you need any support while you get started. That's awesome, I'm glad you're there. So next we're going to share one of our videos. I will preface this with this video is it very much details what happened to Gay, including child sexual abuse. So if this is a time where you want to mute, you don't want to pay attention, that's fine. I think it's about 3 minutes long. So you could just leave for a minute and come back. But we did want to show one of the videos to give you a feel for what the project really kind of started with and where it's going now. But this video is of Gay Yates. She's from Ketchikan, and she got involved in this project because her son is the videographer. He did the filming for all of our stories, save for one that we already had. He did the filming for all these stories, and he said, I will take on this project, but I'd really like to feature my mom as one of the stories. Would that be okay? So he's very personally connected to it also. So I'm going to play the video. If you want to tune out for a couple minutes, feel free. And please let me know right away if you can't hear it, because sometimes I know that happens in Zoom.
Months sober. As an adult, I heard the words I never expected to hear when my mom was on her deathbed. She said, I'm sorry for hurting you as a baby. With permission from my mom, I am telling my story. I was around 2 years old. My mom and dad were fighting. I was screaming while in my crib. I wanted them to stop. I don't know who hit me, but I do remember the warm taste of blood in my mouth as it dried up in my hair the next day. Unsure of how long I laid there before someone eventually cleaned me up. From that day forward, I was never the same. I was number 15 out of 17 kids. I never had a book read to me, and I was never tucked in at night. I never had a hug. I never heard the words, I love you. But by the age of 4, I would wake up with no one around to feed me. Growing up, I was always bothered by the monsters in the house. The sexual abuse has been there for as long as I could remember. At the age of 5, I was smoking cigarettes. At the age of 6, I was smoking pot. At the age of 8, I was stealing beers from fishing boats. By the 8th grade, I was smoking pot and drinking while going to school. I ended up dropping out that year. I had anger problems, more like rage. Because I was never cared for, I spent over 50 years in addiction. Today is a new day. I now feel loved. I know in my heart I am a survivor. I know that God does love me. Whenever life gets hard, I think of my grandchildren. I'm truly blessed. I'm no longer a slave to drugs. I'm now 23 months sober today.
So that video is one of the 5 or 6 that we have right now on the storiesact.org website. And that's the home for Alaska Stories. So here is what that page looks like. before you enter, you're prompted with if you want to have do a grounding activity before you get in there to make sure you're in the right headspace. There's also resources that we'll talk about in a second, but this is the main page. So you can read some of the stories that are submitted so far, and you can watch some more. People are reading these stories. You can see the numbers on the right side of the screen, but we don't have a lot of stories submitted. And so one of the reasons that we decided to host a webinar today was to make sure our partners really have the tools to be able to share about this site. And you know what? If we don't get any more stories submitted, that's okay. The main thing is that people are reading them and they're finding the community that they need. And they don't feel like they're the only one, right? That was the whole goal of this site, was to make sure people felt like knew that they aren't the only one. But it would be nice to start seeing this page populated with more people's stories and more messages of hope, because you can do both. If you see here, there's community messages and survivor stories. So community messages, even though has not been impacted. I mean, I think most people here probably know someone who's been impacted by child abuse or neglect. But even if you aren't impacted, you can just put a message of hope there. You can also, there's a feature to like or comment on someone's story. So you can provide just a little boost of happiness to them. I have a story in here, and I know that every time I hit a 10 people liked your story milestone, I get an email, or if somebody comments on mine, I get a message, I get an email to my inbox too. So just by interacting with a post, you're actually making the community larger and brighter just doing that. Here are a couple of the stories closer up. I know you all can pull it up also, but I wanted to put a couple on the screen. And all of these stories, they feed into the larger R-Wave platform also. And R-Wave works also with older folks that have experienced abuse. It's more domestic violence focused. We're the first organization that's specifically focused on child abuse or neglect. But you can see all of these on their site too, if you're interested. And then of course, the page has resources on it. We tried to make these as Alaska focused as we could, so that, because some of the resources offered there were much more general and national numbers, but we know that we're a very unique state and we need unique services to make sure we're in the right spot. So you can explore those also. And I've tried out calling several of these just to see what they're like, and I can personally attest that they are very good services. I really liked talking to Strong Hearts Native Helpline. They'll help anyone, regardless of if you're Indigenous or not. So just so you know. These are a couple more of this is a different feature actually. These aren't stories, this is the Q&A. So this is just debuted like 2 months ago, and these stories come from lots of different pages. You can see the flags that represent the different countries that they're coming in from. But this is a place to ask if you're not sure where to go to. ChatGPT may be great, but this is a professional that's trained in this work answering these questions. This is not Alaska Children's Trust. This is the R-Wave team, and they have a whole slew of doctors working on this and answering these questions. And some of them get very, very specific. You can filter these questions by like age you were when the experience happened, gender. You can filter by a lot of different things, type of experience, neglect, abuse, that kind of thing. So feel free to explore that as well, because that's a new feature. So that's the website. You'll also see there's a safety exit down here. So point that out to folks that you share this with. That will take you to just one of the last pages that you went to. So if you end up on, I think when our CEO tried it, he ended up on Amazon and he was like, something's wrong. This is broken. And we're like, no, that's exactly what it's supposed to do. So I'm going to turn everything over to Mirna, because she's going to talk about adding a page to this story.
Thank you, Kayla. Can everyone hear me okay? I feel like communication's been breaking a little bit this morning. Thank you, Kayla, for giving me this space to talk about the communications toolkit. So let's go to the next slide. Thank you so much. All right, great. So we are very, very excited to provide you guys with this resource. We have created a communications toolkit that you will be able to use over the next 3 months, September through November. And beyond. We invite you to use these videos and posts and graphics and public service announcements provided in this toolkit to elevate those voices of child abuse and neglect across the state. They have been designed around 3 main ideas: heal, empower, and share. Healing is the grounding idea that we should create safe spaces for survivors and loved ones to feel seen and supported. The idea of empower highlights the strengths of survivors, families, and communities in breaking the cycles of abuse. And the last idea, share, is designed with the idea of building collective awareness, reducing stigma, and inspiring action for prevention. So with those 3 main themes in mind, your role as a partner is vital. By grounding our messages in these 3 main thoughts, we're hoping that we can all amplify these messages and help ensure that survivors and others impacted by child abuse and neglect know they're not alone, and that we can support each other and uplift their voices. So let's go on to the next slide. Okay, perfect. So we have 3 different kinds of assets in this toolkit. We have graphic posts, we have videos and covers, and public service announcements. In the toolkit, we have provided you with not just graphics, but also like the written messages. So you can just copy and paste on your social media platforms. They've been designed to be posted on Facebook and Instagram, just because those seem to be a very mainstream social media accounts that a lot of our partners have. And so we've created all of these graphics and we've uploaded them onto a Google Drive, so you can just download the assets from there. And later we'll provide you with a PDF with the messages and the images that go with them. So let's go on to the next one. Thank you so much. All right, so this is how it works. So the posting schedule. If honestly, the easiest thing you can do is repost. And the Alaska Children's Trust will be posting these messages weekly. And you can just go to our Facebook page and hit repost and then post it on your pages. If you decide to do it and schedule it from your own platforms, we use Meta. Meta is the overarching, like Meta is what Facebook and Instagram is now. And if you use Meta for scheduling posts, you'll be able to enter the information there. We recommend doing 1 or 2 posts per week over 12 weeks. Again, we have we'll provide you with a variety of assets that you can use as you please. So feel free to swap them to fit your social media calendar or post more often if you'd like. We have our graphics and video covers. The reason why we're providing you with video covers is because when you post a video, sometimes they have a weird cover with like the speaker is in like a weird position. And so we provided you with a cover that fits the size that Meta likes for the algorithm. So you'll be able to upload the video, and then when it says select cover, you can just upload the picture to match the video. We have provided you with samples of Facebook and Instagram texts that are ready to go. These captions are short enough for Instagram because the algorithms work slightly differently. For example, on Facebook, you can post links and people can click on those links and go to Stories ACT. And on Instagram, you can't do that. So we've provided you with a format for both Facebook and for Instagram, so you can be more specific. You can download these on our Google Drive, and again, we have a slide on that, but we won't go there yet because we're talking about hashtags next. So the hashtags that we recommend using, and for those of you who are not familiar with the power of hashtags, it really is something that we use on Instagram, and it's just a oh my gosh, I'm missing the word right now, but it's kind of oh my gosh, the word is escaping to me right now. If you look up a hashtag on Instagram, it'll just take you to all the posts that have been tagged with that hashtag. So it's easier to navigate to all of those messages. It's a shortcut. There you go. Sorry, it just came to me. So use these hashtags, hashtag stories ACT, healing through story, prevention starts with us, and Alaska survivors. Then we'll be able to click on those hashtags and see all of your posts and go love all your posts, and then we can continue to amplify each other's messages. Again, this is something that is effective on Instagram, but not on Facebook. So don't worry too much about it. Every time you post, we ask you to please tag us. So our Facebook and Instagram handle are the same. So at Alaska Children's Trust. And every time you post, when we catch that, we will go and share so that we can also amplify your platforms. Every post at the end has a call to action. The call to action here is a clear invitation to visit storiesact.org to share and read and send messages of healing. This is not just about sharing your story, it's also about elevating the other, like the voices of survivors and providing messages of hope for them and healing. And then lastly, we have our PSAs, our public service announcements. For those of you who want to submit the radio ads to local radio stations, here's just like, we provide a couple of different versions. We have a 15-second one and a 30-second one. So let's go to the next one. Thanks, Kayla. All right, perfect. So all the assets live on our Google Drive. And in this folder called Lived Experience 2025 that we will share with you. If you click on the social media assets, you'll get the graphic. And if you click on the video assets, you'll get the video, the format for the video, which also, again, even though we're providing you with the videos, the actual video file and cover, these videos are posted on Stories ACT. So you can just direct people to go to Stories ACT and see the video there. Let's move on to the next one, please. Okay, so then here is just an example of a video in the cover. This is just, on the right side, we have the actual video format and then the cover on the left side, and then the suggested posts for Instagram and Facebook. Let's go on to the next one, please. The social media graphics look like this. It's an image next to the suggested posts. So we have, again, one for Facebook, one for Instagram. They both have calls to action. And again, feel free to adapt these as you please. Please go to the next one. And then here are the PSA language pieces. We have a 15-second one and a 30-second one that you're welcome to send out to local radio stations. So I think that is the last of my presentation. You will receive a full packet with instructions on how to use everything. Please let us know if you have any questions. We're here to help. Thanks, Kayla. Back to you.
Yeah, we really want to get the word out about the project. As you can probably tell, So in addition to these digital resources that Myrna is working really hard to make as accessible as humanly possible so that anyone could copy and paste it, we're also doing posters because we know that old school works really well in Alaska too. So if you'd like a poster, we are sending them out for free. And they do cost us a little bit of money to send because they're large size. So please, so we're taking signups for them instead of just mailing them out willy-nilly. One, make sure you're signed up for our newsletter. It's the place where we're going to put out all of these things over time, especially over the next 3 months. And then you can order a poster. There's a little form on this site here that I will, or somebody on my team can drop in the chat. And that's where you're just going to put in your mailing address and all of that. Yeah, old school, you're a fan of the old school canvas, nice. Yeah, so we want to make sure that this is in every community hub in every little community in the state. Because we know not everybody is on Facebook, not everybody is on Instagram. This project's also been on not Alaska News Nightly, but the one of the talk shows for NPR station. It's been in the ADN, it's been in newspapers around the state. But if you can think of other ways that we should be spreading the word about it, we want to hear them. If there's something that works in your community that we haven't heard of, please reach out to us, and maybe someone can also put our email in the chat, please, so that you can get in touch. But grab your poster at this site.
Awesome. Thank you, Kayla, Myrna. Thank you, of course, Malia. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Teresa. And thank you to all of you. Thank you very much for all your interaction, for all the love you shared in the comments, the useful resources that you are already sharing with each other. So thank you so much for that. We are, so much more we want to say. And please do continue the conversation with us. Do feel free to reach out to us. I know there was a lot of information there. Much of it you will find on our website, but to myself, Kayla, Myrna, Teresa, even Malia, feel free to reach out to any of us directly, and we can help you navigate this. We can help you get hooked up with the right resources or find the tools that are going to work best for you for either PSAs or social media or whatever the case may be. And so I think we've just got another couple of sort of wrap up and final slides we'll whisk through in the next 60 seconds. So our next slide is just to say, if I was to leave you with a final thought, don't let this be the end of the story. Let this be the to be continued, and to be continued by all of us. And then we would just like to thank sponsors who have made it possible for us to have this lived experience storytelling project. So thank you to our funders and sponsors, Costco, the Alaska Humanities Forum, and Prevent Child Abuse America. And most of all, thank you to everybody. All right.
In here, we'll stay on if you have any questions, and thank you. Have a great day.
I had a couple of questions.